Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Archangel, and this is a new installment of Dungeons and Daily Dragons. Okay, so the topic I'd like to discuss with all of you right now is good storytelling. Now, to kick things off, I'd like to introduce to all of you to a familiar voice actor of mine. He's a dungeon master, our VA for Kaneki, and one of my closest friends. His name is TK.
Alright, as far as I'm concerned of what creates a good story, having been in the hospital for much of my youth and always having my uncle and multiple other relatives constantly telling me stories to get me through what was going on there, is you gotta be able to create an escape for the listener. And not just following the hero's journey, as a lot of people, if you need to know more information about that, go on YouTube. A bunch of people dissected that, but for me, it's more just the ability to take the listener out of his world, to be able to give characters that the listener can relate to, but even if they can't, able to visualize them and actually see the conflicts they're going through. Be able to fully describe what is happening to where the listener is totally out of their world. To me, that's what makes a good story. Even if the ending is subpar, even if the characters don't have much personality, if the listener is that invested in the world to where they have forgotten time itself and hours have gone by listening to this story about whatever character it is, if the goddamn character's name could be John Doe, as long as he believes that John Doe exists in this world, that's what makes a good story to me. As a dungeon master, we're playing with multiple people, being able to grab them and invest them into a world of characters that they created. The world itself has to be that character. Not just the individual, but the entire world itself. And that's what I honestly believe makes a good story.
Also, a friend of mine who currently lives in California, and who is also the director to the indie movie The Sutherlands, you can find it on Facebook. I actually helped storyboard that movie. Anyway, the director has a word to say on the subject. He says, and I quote, "What makes a good story is creating something that the audience can either relate to or escape to. Character development, and building the character from having nothing to having something big." I even have an anonymous answer from someone I met through work. She said that she prefers stories that keep you at the edge of your seat, horror, thrillers, and whatnot. This last answer here, what I've just said, is what leads me to the first section of our topic. Everyone has their own taste. When you get together with your friends, some may talk more about the DCCW dramas like Supergirl or Arrow. Or maybe you'll have friends who will talk more about the Marvel Netflix shows like Daredevil or Luke Cage. Me personally, I will take either. But there are always going to be some people who will take DC Comics over Marvel Comics, and others who will take Marvel Comics over DC Comics. But we as individual human beings, as I've said, have our own tastes. When it comes to what we watch on TV, or what music we listen to, or what stories we pay attention to, it's all in the matter of what that individual person likes. Which leads to an excellent example of the current topic. Game of Thrones versus Lord of the Rings. Now, before someone pulls out Longclaw or Narsil, let's take a step back and repeat the name of this section. Everyone has their own taste. In fact, my VA for Kaneki has thoughts for this too. Let me pull him out here again.
As far as when it comes to comparing Game of Thrones to Lord of the Rings, one thing I said was, why would you judge the son off of the father? Game of Thrones, if you ask George R. R. Martin, or through the interviews that you would see from George R. R. Martin, he clearly said Game of Thrones was inspired by his thoughts of what would Aragorn's political policies be. it's a direct reference from it. Without Lord of the Rings, we wouldn't have Game of Thrones. Without Game of Thrones, I won't say without Game of Thrones because the popularity's blown up rather recently. But you can clearly tell that the book series had an impact on a lot of people, even before the series came out. But without Lord of the Rings, introducing these fantasies and creating a world that, if you want to reference what I just said earlier, that literally the world itself was a character that people have expanded upon multiple times. Even though not all the stories are great, you can still transport yourself into it. So Game of Thrones does the exact same thing. It's a whole different world that's clearly inspired by another bigger world. And it's become its own. So even though it is the offspring of something else, it is its own being.
You know, if that's the case, then I guess that makes Attack on Dragon the grandson. Regardless, though, my buddy TK's right. You can't pit the grandfather against the father. It's unnecessary. Personally, I'm certain without Tolkien's work, we wouldn't have Martin's work either. After all, in the end, they're both the same thing. Epic fantasy stories. Although reading Game of Thrones to your kids wouldn't be the brightest idea compared to reading them The Hobbit, of course. But, well, like I said, it's all in the matter of taste, so.
I sentence thee to hell!
Let's get to our next topic at hand. The next section, finding inspiration. When you watch a tremendously creative movie like Avatar, or maybe play a game like The Elder Scrolls Skyrim, or whichever you prefer, some people are left with their motors running in their minds, pumping out ideas of their own. That is what we call inspiration. Of course, inspiration can come from anyone, or anything. Also, before I dive deeper into this topic, I'd like to share you all this clip. If anyone remembers or has seen Shoddycast's video, 6 ways to make Bethesda's next open world game a mediocre RPG. There was this one topic that caught my attention that I'd like to show you all.
The Witcher 3 won most of the critical acclaim the year Fallout 4 was released, and whether you personally agree with that judgment or not is irrelevant. People who played it seem to genuinely think that CD Projekt Red were the best dungeon masters that year. Their characters had a sense of nuance and realism in that game that you can only achieve with good writing. If you were curious enough to watch the credits roll at the end of The Witcher 3, you would note that their team boasted writers who were published authors and crime novelists.
Now, before I continue, I just want to say to you, Josh, you have made excellent points on the subject at hand, so kudos to you. Now, the one thing I'd like to pick out is this name here, Karolina Statira. I hope I said that right. I did a little digging on her work online, and I found this interview she had with, I think, Red Bull? Or at least their Polish division over there, since I found the interview in Polish. But I found a translated version of the interview on Reddit, so anyway, here's what I'd like to share with you all here, and it reads, where did you draw inspiration from, apart from the obvious influence of Sapkowski's writing? In the game, there are many references to literature, movies, and real historical events. There is everything in there. Hard to even enumerate and list it all. People from many countries and cultures work at CD Projekt Red. With diverse hobbies and outlooks, each can come to us and say they have an idea. In The Witcher, we have references to pop culture, to other games, but also to the literature, most often the classical variety. The Wedding in the Hearts of Stone expansion is as taken straight from Spionski's The Wedding. The house it takes place in is based upon a real estate from a novel. There is also a fragment taken from The Wedding in the Dialogues. And in the base game, there is also a reference to Mickiewicz the Forefather's Eve. There's Adam Ansik's poem, There Was Nothing Between Us. And the crypt we're told speaks with its lines. We also have Steinslalom and a reference to Solaris. In the second The Witcher we also had Assassin's Creed. So a game inside a game. Movies are also there. many exchanges are based on them, as the team working on them watches a tremendous amount of movies. They can later work on each conversation, gestures, facial expressions of the characters, the way they talk and appear for hours. We were praised for our visual narration being conducted in a very movie-like fashion from the get-go. See? Even a game such as The Witcher 3 can gain inspiration from anywhere. It's like Oscar Wilde said, life imitates art. For example, I'd like to share with you all the origin of Attack on Dragon. When I just started college in 2012, I was 18, and right now I'm 23.
Fuck, you're old.
Fake laugh, hiding real pain.
I met some friends who got me back into watching anime again. Believe it or not, when I was in high school, anime didn't exist to me anymore. It was just that stressful. So, alright, back to the topic at hand. Believe it or not, I didn't even know K-pop existed until I met them in college, so yeah. I'm slow. But that's not the story I want to focus on. Let's get back to the subject of anime. At around the time, in the middle of my first semester, I discovered the one and only
Attack on Titan.
It was absolutely gripping the moment I saw it. Then shortly I discovered fanfiction. Yeah, I'm that slow. And I began writing my fanfics. And after a year of fanfic writing, I found Attack on Space on YouTube. Credits to those guys. And the moment that series sat in my mind, I found out what I wanted to do. When life hands you an awesome anime like Attack on Titan, an interesting audio play like Attack on Space, and an interest in fantasy literature, such as myself. And that's how Attack on Dragon was thought of. I was inspired by many things at the time. There was Lord of the Rings, World of Warcraft, Warhammer, regular and 40k, and there was of course Skyrim, which I believe was released a year before I discovered Attack on Titan. Anyway, to this video's conclusion, good storytelling can come from anywhere in life. Anyone can relate to any kind of story. It all depends on their tastes. If you have an idea for the next big Star Wars level franchise, or the next epic fantasy series, I can guarantee you will find inspiration for your story anywhere you go, and anything you see. Now then, if you want to follow us on our social websites, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook here and here. I wish you all a good day and a good night. I will see you next time.